Hi, I'm Jim Evans. Welcome to Loose Change, the show that asks a burning question. We don't have a burning question, do we? We don't have any questions. Oh, well. But you know what? A lot of people ask me all the time about our guest on today's show, so you definitely want to hang around for that. Now, top of the program, we'll take a look at the list, please. I've not seen this yet. I always check out surveys, rankings, and lists, and this one focuses on Youngstown. The Youngstown area ranks among the nation's leaders in affordable housing, we knew that, exports, and federal enlightenments? Oh no, federal indictments. That's what it says. Okay. Good arm. Speaking of good arms, how about the big buzz with Johnny Manziel, the Browns' second pick in the first round of the recent NFL draft? He's always in the news, but people are pumped up. You know what? I haven't seen Cleveland sports fans this juiced since 10-cent beer night. I gotta think that's the only, well, maybe not that much. Also keeping on the good arm theme, movie $1 Million Arm, based on a true story. Apparently, if you didn't know this, a scout from the Pittsburgh Pirates found these two guys in India and gave them a tryout, pitching tryout, and they were able to throw like over 90 miles an hour. So he signed them up to minor league contracts. Two guys from India. Ironically, he discovered them working in a New Delhi, downtown Pittsburgh. Oh, and the Tony Awards just televised, and again, another gala extravaganza. The show went off pretty much without a hitch, although apparently there was a minor skirmish over someone's purse. And that was in the men's room. Hey, Ode Aduma joins us next. Ode Aduma joins us next. That's right, I have to repeat that. Everyone's excited about that. You will be too. Hang around right here on Loose Change.
Armstrong Local Programming features our community like no one else. Meet your friends and neighbors at special events. Find the perfect pet. Celebrate our region's rich history or enjoy our natural wonders. Armstrong Local Programming is available online, on demand, and on your local Armstrong channel. Find the complete program schedule at ArmstrongOneWire.com. Local programming, exclusively from Armstrong. One Wire, infinite possibilities.
Welcome back to Loose Change. I'm Jim Evans, and I have the pleasure to be joined by a gentleman that I consider a friend and certainly a former colleague and someone who a lot of viewers recognize. Ode Aduma, former TV 27 news reporter, and thanks so much for being on the show, Ode.
Thanks for inviting me.
Great to see you.
Yeah.
And like we like to do on this show is off the top, we'll have people give a little background on yourself. And you're not originally from this area.
No.
Tell us about that and how you got here and got started.
Born in New York City. Spent part of my life there. My dad worked in the steel mills here and moved the family to Youngstown. Okay. That's how I got here. And I'm glad I moved here because it's the kind of community I love being in. You know, I found out that I like doing a lot of things here that I couldn't do in New York City.
Right. What age was that?
I was young. I was in grade school.
Okay, so you don't remember a whole lot about living in New York City?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We went back a lot. In fact, when you like something a lot and you come to a strange community, Youngstown was strange to me. It was different. You know, here I was from a large city where there was always people on the street, day and night, and to come to a city where at nighttime they close the doors, they shut the lights off, everybody goes to bed. So it took a little getting used to, and I was always ready to go back. And we had relatives still living in New York City. My grandfather lived in New York. So we would always go back and visit and spend some time there. And then my grandfather eventually came to Youngstown to visit. He loved the town. He wasn't ready to move here, but he used to drive here at first. And he had one of these Chryslers in those days, had this very long front end. You know, this is probably a 50 or 60 Cadillac that he had, or Chrysler rather, with these long front ends on them. And we told him that, we thought, why don't you fly? And he was one of those people that said, if God had intended me to fly, he would have given me wings. Eventually, my grandfather did take a plane and thought it was the greatest thing in the world. Wondered what took him so long, because an 8-hour drive by a car now it was in an hour.
Sure, yeah.
And you know, in those days, you could get on United Airlines and fly direct, which you can't even get a plane to fly direct to any place from here now.
Good point. Good
Yeah.
point. What was it about Youngstown that kept you here? You just like the community, the people, that whole thing?
I think I like everything about Youngstown. You know, first of all, I found out that even though I was born in a large city, I'm really a small town guy. I like the country atmosphere. You know, I do a lot of cycling, and
we'll get to that.
You know, from my house, I can be in PA in 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
On a bicycle. You know, I do a lot of riding out in the country, which if I lived in New York City, all my riding would be in an urban setting, and cars and trucks and buses. So I don't have to do that.
And we won't dwell on this, but when's the last time you've been back to New York?
Oh,
too long.
Yeah, you know, I think the last time I was in New York, my oldest daughter, who was pretty close to 50, was just a baby, and we went there for my grandfather's funeral. I can't recall going back for anything else since then.
Okay, well, you're definitely entrenched here. Now, you were doing other things before you got into TV at TV 27. Talk about that, and then how you got into the television business.
Well, you know, I grew up wanting to be an artist, and the good Lord's always given me things that sometimes I didn't ask for. You know, art was one of those things I did ask for, and I prayed, and you know, I dreamed, and I just saw all of those thoughts. And I was a fashion artist for Strauss Department Store.
Wow.
Finished fashion artist for Strauss Department Store. I even did a magazine cover for a music magazine, and you know, I even at one point did murals on buildings on Hillman Street. Cool. A set of buildings there. I don't think any of those buildings are in existence today. I think they've all been torn down. And you know, I paint, and you know, art was just my thing. But someone met me. I think it was a guy, Frankie Halfacre, who met me and asked me to do the cover for the magazine. They were starting a music magazine, and Frankie asked me if I was interested in broadcasting. At that time, and you won't believe this, but at that time, Frankie had a show on WNIO in Niles, and asked me if I would be his newsman. And I said, I don't know anything about news. I have no interest in it. And but he kept talking to me, and I said, okay, I'll give it a shot and see what I can do. And at that time, you just rip and read, you know, rip something off the wire machine and read it. And I was kind of active in the community as well, and I ran into Judy Fielder. And Judy interviewed me one day and said that, oh, you would be great in broadcasting. And she talked to me and introduced me to Bill Aber, who was the news director at KBN. And then I met Norm Berger and went through all of the interview process. And then they said, you know what, why don't you go back to school? Your background's in art and you're involved in the community, but how about going back specifically for broadcasting? And I thought about it, and I said, well, you know what, I'll give it a shot, and let's see. And that was it. And broadcasting was not one of those things that I had ever thought about. It's the longest job I ever had. And ended up, when I finished, I got inducted into the Broadcasters Hall of Fame. So you can't beat that with a stick.
Well, that's great. Yeah, tremendous that worked out for you that way, and you know.
And I loved the job. I mean,
yeah,
I had so much fun with it because I was never into the celebrity thing, either myself as a celebrity or idolizing celebrities.
Right.
And I met so many famous people, interviewed so many famous people, never thought I would ever meet these people, weren't even thinking about them. And Joel Gray was one of those persons that, you know, at first I had heard about Joel Gray, didn't know him, didn't know a lot about him, but I knew a little bit about him. Very nice person. Probably the most humorous person I ever met was Red Skelton. And I was a big fan of Red Skelton because I just thought there's nobody funnier than this guy. We met him at one of the Holiday Inns. I think it was the one that's on 46 in Austintown. And we went there to interview him. The guy walked in with a shopping bag. And all of the reporters were standing there waiting for him to come in. And we thought some guy would walk in, ladies and gentlemen, we want you to meet Red Skelton. guy's walking around with the shopping bag and, hi, I'm Rich Skelton. You know, he's introducing himself, and he told me something. He says, wherever I go, I don't own a dime's worth of stock in Kmart, but I find, he's an artist. So he says, I buy all my art supplies at Kmart.
Wow.
And he says, I really don't have any stock in it. He said, and you know what? I'm also a photographer, so I buy all my film at Kmart. He says, I found that their film is fresher than anybody else's film. And I said, now here's a man that's got lots of money.
He's at Kmart.
And he's at Kmart shopping. You know, he found out that he can get fresh film and art supplies. And I go, now, I'm a poor man. Why should I argue with that?
Exactly. Did you lose your, I would assume you didn't, but let me rephrase that better said. Did you still hold on to your passion for art once you got into
Oh, yeah.
television?
I have not since retiring from KBN, which, you know, you asked me how long ago that was, and that's pretty close to about 10 years. I've illustrated 2 children's books. Dr. Martha Bruce from Sharon found out about my art, and she had written some children's books in the past, and she wanted an artist that had spent some time in Africa. And I had years ago, and not as much time as she spent, but she asked me if I would do this. And we happened to have been in the same country, Nigeria. And I said, okay. At first, I was reluctant to do it because I paint. I'm a painter. I'm not an illustrator. Okay. And I said, I'm not an illustrator. And so her challenge to me was, think about it. And I said, I don't think I really want to do it. And so she says, if you think about it and you decide to do it, would you do it? I said, okay, I'll tell you what. If I can visualize what the character looks like, and you agree that's what he looks like, then I'll do it. So she told me about this little boy that always gotten in trouble. The title of the book was Ode Learns a Lesson. So a typical young boy, didn't like to be clean, didn't like to be fussed over, liked to get into trouble, and liked to do what he wanted to do, which was play. And one of his favorite things to play with was a frog. So her books always had a scheme to it. And she would use a color, and the color she wanted for this was green, so the frog was going to be green. And that would be the color you would see all the way through the book, because the rest of the book was black and white. And I had to visualize what Obi looked like. So I sketched out a kid and with dirt on his face and his clothes, and I said, okay, this is what I come back with. And she said, that's Obi. So that was the first book. And the second one we did was Auntie's Paintbrush. And this book was about the children that she had taught and read to. She would always have story time for the children in that community where she lived at. And they were always, and they were true stories, which was a fantastic thing about it, was she changed the names sometimes of the kids, because quite naturally, even though we're in America, this book could end up in Nigeria, could end up in Russia, and the people might read it. And there was one kid who I think died later, and he was always in trouble, even as a child. So we did 7 different stories on that book alone. Right. The other story was just one story. So yeah, I still have my art interest, and I'm not painting like I should be. I started on a series of jazz artists, and I think I've done 4 of the jazz artists, and I haven't finished it yet. And the sad part about it, every time I paint someone, they die. Of course, they're old, but they you know, and they're legends. Dizzy Gillespie was one of them.
Sure.
You know, what's his name? Miles Davis was another. Like I said, as soon as I got through painting him, boom. You know, so I don't want them to know that I'm doing this.
Greg, we don't want any, as great as a painter, I'm sure, we don't want any portraits done here, so not yet. Anyway,
no.
So, we're going to take a break here, and we have a lot more to go here with the great Ode Aduma. Stick around. More Loose Change coming up.
Bigger smiles, louder cheers, longer talks. Enjoy the possibilities more than ever with Armstrong. Armstrong delivers the latest in television. On-demand, multi-room PVR, high definition. Zoom Internet has the speed and reliability you need for all your devices. And it's all backed by local, award-winning customer service to keep you connected. Enjoy the possibilities with Armstrong.
Welcome back to Loose Change. Again, I'm Jim Evans with Ode Aduma. And Ode, you talked earlier about, you know, being an artist and you're working at Strauss and then you got into broadcasting, eventually at TV 27. What was that transition like for you at that time, going from pretty much a 180, something totally disconnected from, you know, what you ended up doing for 40 years?
Going from art to journalism is, yeah, it's a different step. It's a different community. Yes. In art, you know, you're dealing with abstract sometimes, and you're dealing with, we were dealing with fashions, you know.
Yeah. We
weren't dealing with fashions in journalism. What we were dealing with was the truth, you know, and I think that the biggest problem I had was always making sure that the stories that I reported on was the truth. And I got a real quick story for you that I still feel a little bit bad about it today, but I really felt bad about it at that particular time. I had a photographer, couldn't put two shoes on at the same time. Couldn't put his right foot on and his left foot on and not get the right foot on the left foot. And I won't tell you who that photographer was.
Well, I was never a photographer, so that eliminates me.
It wasn't you, but this guy was supposed to meet me at Girard City Council one night. And I don't know what happened. You know, Girard's not that far from Youngstown.
No.
I think they butt each other. But in any case, when he got to council, he was late. He missed the whole thing. Mm-hmm. There'd been a fight there. And
at
then,
the council meeting?
Yeah, the mayor had initiated the fight. The mayor at that time, I won't call his name either.
No, that's okay.
He's deceased, but the mayor at that time knew how to ring people's buttons, or push people's buttons. Mm-hmm. He pushed one councilman's button and got the other councilman mad at that councilman, and the two of the councilmen got into an argument, and then the mayor just sat back and twiddled his thumbs. Wow. And the two councilmen actually got it and threw blows at each other. The police chief had to get up and step in between the two councilmen. They finished all their council business and everybody left. And I'm sitting there and I'm wondering, where's my photographer at? And he walks in, he said, "Ode, I don't know what happened. I got lost." I said, "God, you got lost coming to Girard?" He said, "Yeah, I got lost." I go, how could you get lost driving from Youngstown to Girard?
That's hard to do.
Yeah. And the next time, we were supposed to cover the state board president, the state of education board president. And we really had some questions we wanted to ask this guy. You know, having worked with photographers, you would give them a clue in an interview where you wanted them to start rolling the camera, especially if it's a news conference. And I said, okay, I got this guy's sheet. I know what he's going to say. Watch me and I'll cue you when I want you to roll the tape. Because we had tape at that time.
Right.
So I gave him the clue. I cued him up. When I looked down at the sheet and saw we were getting there, I gave myself at least 2 minutes. Because that way we could take what we needed out of that and then you know, let him roll for a couple of minutes and then cut it off. So I cued him and he nodded, and I went back to writing notes and stuff. And you know, we always carried a recorder at that time so that we could listen on the way back to the station,
right, yeah.
Pull our sound bites and time them. Mm-hmm. So I did that. I got back to the station. I wrote up the script. I wrote the cut sheet up. I handed it to him. He went to the room to edit. He came to the phone and he called me. He says, "Ode?" I said, "What?" "We don't exactly have that piece that you're looking for." Wow. I said, "Oh." I said, "Okay." So now I'm listening to the tape recorder again. I find another bite. I said, "Okay, take this one." "Okay." A few minutes later, he calls me back. I don't have that one. So, you know, I just said, find something that's suitable, that goes along with what the script says, and do that. I get home and I'm watching the news at 11 o'clock, and it's nothing like what we want. In fact, we make this guy sound like a liar.
Oh.
And the next day, he calls the station. You guys did a hatchet job on me. It's like you guys went out intentionally to assassinate me. And the news director.
That's not the case.
No, but the news director called me in and he wanted to know what happened. And I was trying to explain it to him, and he says, "You should. If he didn't have what you wanted, you shouldn't have used it." I said, "But he told me he had it."
Yeah.
I said, so I had to go by his word.
Well, it's not an exact science.
No, it's not.
You know, and my next question, that leads into my next question. What would you say, what were and what are the keys to being a good TV reporter? And I know you said you got to tell the truth, and what else is involved from your perspective?
I think the first part of being a good reporter, TV or radio or even a print reporter, is you have to want to do that job. And you have to want to do it for the right reasons. I ran into too many people who wanted to be in the business because they'd be on TV.
Okay.
Or because they'd be on the radio.
Yeah.
And they thought, this will be great because people will know who I am. I used to look at the job, despite the fact that people knew me, and people would always come up and shake your hands and things, it made you feel good that people didn't hate you and wanted to be your friend. But the thing I thought most about the job was I was no different than that guy working in the steel mill. Just like he, I punched a clock. I punched in and I punched out. You know, we didn't come to work and just go to work. We had to punch in and punch out and we had to be accountable for our time. The other thing is that you realize that how you report a story reflects on that person and the community. I used to look at stories and go, how does this story benefit our community as a whole? There were some stories I really didn't like doing. I hated man on the streets because in most cases you had to prompt the guy as to what was going on. I don't know how many times I remember going to an ethnic center once, and this was at that time his particular country was getting its freedom, and I went in and they didn't know that their country was getting their freedom. In fact, this particular country club, they were drinking. They didn't care what was going on. But the one guy I found there who was there said, well, I'm not that ethnic group, my wife is, but I'll answer the question. And he gave me a fairly decent answer, but I thought, is it news if you have to prompt somebody to give you an answer?
That's a good question.
and I often think about that, and for that reason, I spent, I don't know how many times on Man on the Streets telling people what the story was all about. And I thought, pretty soon I'm going to be telling them what the answer is, and I don't want to do that. I would rather go out and find people who really have a concern about an issue. For instance, today, I've been watching the newspapers and reading the stories, and everybody's talking about the young man who was held hostage or captured, and I was thinking, okay, when are we going to get tired of this story? And right now I'm hearing that half the community that he comes from is supportive of him, and the other half aren't supportive of him. His parents are now being threatened, and the police are trying to protect them. And I'm thinking, okay, it's a news story. I know it's a news story, but when do we pull the plug on it? How long do we carry this story? Because I've seen one, like, what's his name, California Chrome. I said, okay, we've killed this horse and we brought him back.
Yeah, exactly. Now
the race is over with now. We're going back and asking the owner, what do you think about what happened? I thought, all right.
Well, as you know, the industry has changed. It's 24 hours now, 7 days a week, and it's nonstop. And I think that's where we have that constant cycle. Was there a particular interview you did with someone that still stands out in your mind? Wow, that was a good, positive experience, or otherwise? You did a lot of them, so that's hard to pinpoint, perhaps. But
every story was different. I found some stories. I can't say that I had a favorite story. I thought, what would have been my favorite story? Some of the stories that I did were with people, like I said before, I never thought I would even meet. and found out that they were genuinely very, very nice people.
Sure.
You know, I interviewed entertainers of all kinds. I remember one of the people that I never thought anything about meeting, and Dion DiMucci. You know, and I know you don't know who that is, but Dion and the Belmonts.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I saw those guys at Standby Auditorium, and we had a good time. You know, we laughed and we talked about what their careers was like, because this was quite a while after they'd been a big hit. At that time, Dion was no longer Dion and the Belmont. It was Dion DiMucci.
Okay.
And you would have thought those guys were kids. These guys were probably in their 30s, and they were jumping from pillar to post at Standby Auditorium, just having a good time playing. And they worked with my photographer. They pulled some kind of prank on me when I wasn't looking, you know, and I think they took a piece of equipment that we had with us to use, and they got ready to do the interview with him, and all of a sudden it wasn't there. But he couldn't hold us. He couldn't hold it. He started laughing, and so I knew something was up. That was, you know, that's what I liked, was that when you find people who can act like stars, but don't.
Yeah.
You know, they act like the everyday person that you meet. I interviewed James Baldwin. James Baldwin was a controversial person. He was an author, controversial as an author, but very, very nice person. And he was real. I remembered there was another reporter there, and for some reason he didn't like this reporter, and she wanted to involve herself in the interview, and he was just giving an interview to me, and she tried to ease her cassette player right into in front of him, and he said, "Take that away."
We only have a little over a moment left, and we could go on and on and on about the time.
That's because I talk a lot.
Time at TV 27 and the great work you did, and people sure remember everything you did and the time you put there. It was a great place to work, and it was a pleasure for me to be there with yourself, of course, and Greg,
we
and
had
so
fun
many
at that
others.
time.
We did, and now as we actually will give a little plug to your radio show. You're doing radio program involved with another passion, bicycling. At Bicycling Today on 1390. Talk quickly about that show.
That's an interesting show because we look at all aspects of bicycling. I think one of the things that I really like is that I interview and have people on the show who are into cycling, and we talk about what they're doing. I had a woman on last week who just got into cycling and running and swimming 5 years ago, and today this lady has stood on the podium 3 times. She does time trials and biathlon. We also have a lawyer that we have on the show. He's called the Bike Attorney. He's on the last Wednesday of every month. And the show comes on every Wednesday, 5 p.m., 1390 WNIO or 1390.com. And it's called Bicycling Day on Sports Animal.
The Sports Animal. Well, again, we could talk so much more. Maybe we'll do it again if we have the opportunity. And that certainly would be my pleasure. And certainly a great pleasure to talk with you and have you on the
Pleasure
program.
to talk to you.
Great, Ode.
Always a pleasure to see you.
Ode Aduma. And we'll be right back to wrap it up here on Loose Change. Stick with us.
Enjoy the convenience of home phone service from Armstrong. Armstrong Telephone delivers reliability you can't get with a cell phone. All your calling is one low monthly price, no confusing rate plan. Your favorite calling features are included. Check out the exclusive online management tools, set call forwarding, do not disturb, and more. You can even have your voicemail sent to your email. For great savings, bundle television, telephone, and internet. Armstrong, one wire, infinite possibilities.
That's going to do it for this edition of Loose Change. I'm Jim Evans.
And I'm Ode Aduma. Keep pedaling.
Catch us next time.